Me?
Yeah, just on. I'm sorry, Granite Skies, Mike. um,
Mike
I just want.
Stevens.
Yeah, Mike Stevens. That probably makes more sense. Um, I'm, I'm kind of losing it here. Um, did you turn your mic down at all? A little bit?
No, I'm
No.
still looking for buttons. I'm not used to doing this on the computer. I usually do it from the phone.
Okay, gotcha. Now, Mike, in the bottom right, Mike Stevens, in the bottom right-hand corner where you see the time, do you see like a little arrow or something that you can click and it brings up a few more options?
We got 3 little boxes next to each other.
All right. Does any of them have like a speaker icon or anything?
Not yet.
Okay.
If you click those 3 buttons that are horizontal, it should come
Oh,
up
wait,
with an
yeah.
audio and video setting.
Audio and video settings, yep.
Yep.
Nice.
I'm learning Skype as we go, as we're doing this.
And Mike, the host, is my audio okay? I haven't even asked you about that.
Your audio is perfect.
Okay.
And Mike Stevens' video is frozen. Either the aliens froze him or his video froze. I'm not sure which it is, but it's one of those two.
That's all right. It might have intermittent freezing. Mike Stevens, can you hear us though? He might be playing with the audio settings.
Where is he and where are you?
I'm up in Maine and he's down in New Hampshire.
Where in Maine?
I'm in the Bar Harbor area.
I have no idea where that's at.
Do you know Augusta or Bangor?
I don't know Maine for the moon. You could spin me around in Maine and I would. We just lost.
Oh, it looks like we lost him. Yeah, he might have a poor connection where he is. But yeah, I'm like on the mid coast of Maine.
So where's he at?
He's in New Hampshire.
But where in New Hampshire?
Boy, where
Is he out in the
exactly?
middle of nowhere, or is he?
No, he's not in the middle of nowhere, but it's all fairly rural. So I'll try to add him again here.
Well, I had an interview today with a contracting company for a job south of Atlanta here, and it's with a internet service provider. I've never heard of them, but they own like from South Atlanta south down like to an hour south of Atlanta. They own that whole space, and down to Macon. I think they own the city of Macon too. They're probably got a contract with that city, which is unique to them, and so they advertise fast internet, but if you look on the website, it's 200 megabits per second. And you're like, that's not fast. But they do advertise 1 gig speed too, so I don't know what's.
Hey, there he is. Hey, buddy.
Hey, so I learned how to hang up the call and I adjust. Is that better on the microphone?
It is.
Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
Okay, so you're in New Hampshire?
I am.
And where in New Hampshire?
The Seacoast region.
Okay, so you're on the coast. So what's the nearest big city?
Portsmouth.
That's a big city? Give me a city I would know.
Boston, I guess, is the closest, but you're like, what, 2 hours from that probably?
Yeah, just outside an hour, depending on what time of day you're trying to get there.
Okay, so y'all, we're recording. We're 4 minutes into this. So each of y'all give me or give the listener a brief introduction to who you are. Anything you want to say, it can be 30 seconds or 30 minutes for all I care. As long as it's what you want to say about yourself as an introduction without going too deep into your alien stuff. Just give us an introduction of just who you are, where you're born, what you do, and maybe the tiniest bit about your background. That the elevator conversation, extended or short elevator conversation.
Sure. You want to go first, Mike? You want me to?
You can.
Okay. I'm Nomar Slevik. I was born in Fort Kent, Maine, which is way at the tip of Maine, right next to Canada. And I've been interested in all things paranormal since a very early age, and we can get into some of that in a little bit. And I'm an author and a quasi-documentarian, which means I'm not really a documentarian, but I try hard. And I
So I'll
also,
stop for a second. Do you
yeah,
have a copy of your book sitting next to you?
I do not.
Oh, darn. All right, go ahead. Keep going.
um, I also make music, and I have a podcast that also covers all things paranormal.
Okay. And Mike?
Yeah, so I'm a paranormal investigator and a lifelong experiencer, and out of those experiences, I've formed a group that helps other experiencers.
And where were you born?
Right here in New Hampshire.
And what do you guys do for a living? I know you don't do podcasts for a living. What do y'all? How do y'all make your money? How do you bring in income?
For me, I am a content creator, so everything I do is what brings me in the money creatively.
So you make what type of content do you make that brings in the money?
The books, the documentaries are mostly what bring in the money. The podcast is just starting to bring in a little bit of money in regards to ads, but the bigger, the higher dollar stuff is the books and documentaries.
So you just got. When did your book come out? What's the name of it?
It's called Granite Skies, A Disconcerted Journey Through the Unknown, and that came out at the tail end of August.
Okay, so is that your first book?
It is not. That's my it's really my fifth book, but third, professionally published work.
And which book, if any, makes you the money?
This one has been doing pretty well so far, but the one that's the most return on is the one before this called Otherworldly Encounters. And that's a book that is solely about encounters that take place in Maine, but it covers, 30 odd stories. And that came out on Llewellyn Worldwide Publishing in 2018. And then I had another book come out on Schiffer Publishing in 2014 called UFOs Over Maine.
So before any of your books came, what year did your first book come out?
2014.
And how did you make your living before you published any books?
I worked for a very large cellular company.
And what did you do for them?
I worked as a supervisor for a call center.
Oh, now you're in my area now. Okay, so Mike, how do you make your living?
Um, I used to be heavily in the construction fields, and then I kind of gave that up shortly before this whole COVID mess to start doing this stuff more full time, which hasn't worked out quite so well. And so now I am basically a struggling gig worker at this point.
When you say you're a gig worker, you mean you have short-term contracts that allow you to work remotely, that sort of thing?
Yeah, more, as they come type opportunities instead of something more long term at this point, which allows me to focus more on this stuff.
So tell me about your last paying gig. What did you do? Did you have a 1-day job, a 1-month job? What did you do in your last job, that paying job, most recent? Oh, we lost your audio. We totally lost your audio.
Still nothing.
We'll say something to you if we hear your voice. We'll say we can hear you.
Well, this has been fun, hasn't it?
That's okay. I mean, we're just getting started. We haven't even got 10 minutes yet.
Yeah.
Unplug and replug in your mic, and I don't know. Oh, hold on, I'll be while you're playing with that. I'm gonna go let my dog out. I'll be right back.
I think I can actually hear you clicking, Mike.
Can you hear me?
Yay!
All right.
Awesome.
All right, I'll be there in just a second.
Sure.
It says I'm muted, but I'm not. And when I wasn't muted, it said I was. And yeah, I'm not enjoying this.
This is wild. I know, man.
If it was just this, it'd be one thing. Just the fucking timing with everything else. It's a stress lately.
Sorry, buddy.
No, it's all right. I got it figured out. Somebody's gonna hook me up, and it's all gonna be fine. I just gotta muddle through the few days. I just gotta
Yeah.
muddle through this for today, which.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm back. It's really odd. Just as you dropped, my dog was scratching at the door trying to get out of my wife's room. She's in there sleeping. And then while you were at the end of your getting it fixed, my dog started scratching after I let him out to go back in the room. I'm like, what the heck does he want, out or in? So, okay, so what was your last paying gig? What did you do?
Just like some yard work and staining a deck.
Cool. All right, so you're a handyman, in other words.
Yeah, labor basically.
Cool. And what is your aspiration besides the obvious, like the helping people with the paranormal stuff? That's your dream. But do you have any aspirations for making a living that I don't, I mean, maybe you'll make a living as a paranormal something or other, but I'm not gonna bet on it. So I'm not saying it won't happen. But as far as practical near-term dreams, what do you have? Anything that you're focusing on or thinking about or dreaming of that is like to you, it's very practical and going to happen very quickly?
No, you're very right that doing this stuff is not going to ever make a living wage. No, at this point, I'm just kind of going with the flow and doing what I can when I can. And I mean, eventually, I'd probably get into something more web-based, maybe like run a social media account for somebody, something like that type thing. But
Have you ever created a website?
oh yeah.
Have you? With just straight HTML or did you use anything fancy?
Oh no, just drop and drag. No coding.
Yeah. So you use a template and
Right.
yeah, and you go find somebody's template and then play with it, right?
Correct.
Okay, that's what I do too. Anyway, all right. So let's get on with the interview then. So, which of you has the more extensive paranormal background as far as who's the oldest, who thinks they got into the paranormal earliest?
I think I'm the oldest by like 2 years, and I'm not sure on our background. It's probably pretty close. Maybe, as a serious hobby, 15, 17 years ago, something like that.
So tell the viewers very first paranormal experience ever.
Sure. I was 3 or 4 years old. I'm not exactly sure, but I was living in Fort Kent. I was sound asleep, and a loud clap of thunder woke me up. Or at least that's what I thought it was. And my eyes were darting around, kind of confused, and I was trying to find like an explanation for what was going on. And then I could hear rain hitting my bedroom windows, and I could see the sky light up. So I was like, oh, a thunder and lightning storm. So I like kneeled up on my bed and I'm watching, the lightning and I'm hearing thunder. And then just after like a few moments, there was this really like obscene lightning bolt that got stuck in a cloud. And at least that's how my 4-year-old mind understood it, and that's how I actually remember it. But if I were to ask you to draw a lightning bolt, you would draw this jagged yellow line, this thick jagged yellow line, or kind of like the charging indicator on your smartphone. And this is what I'm seeing stuck in a cloud, and there's electricity coming off of it, and I'm hearing booms. And then I don't really know what happened next. I kind of like fell back asleep, I guess. I wake up in the morning, I go to the bathroom, and when I'm walking back from the bathroom to my bedroom, I can see out the window, and that lightning bolt's still there, stuck in the sky. So I ran downstairs to get my dad to show him. And by the time we get up there, it was gone. And I was really trying to, as a 3 or 4-year-old, I'm trying to explain that, there was lightning stuck in the cloud. Like, what was that, Dad? And he was like, doing the adult thing, like, yeah, patting my head and whatever. But I think I was like really insistent because he kind of had to like get down on my level, put his hand on my shoulders. And he was like, listen, it didn't even rain last night. There was no storm. Not really sure what you're talking about. So I didn't realize, I'm probably 16, 17, 18. And that's when that story had always stuck with me, but I didn't think about it through this new UFO lens until I was older. And I was thinking maybe that's the first time I saw a UFO. So that was the first ever encounter I had.
So you describe it as a cloud. A kid can look at something and describe it just as accurately as an adult, even though you might not know what it is. So describe what you saw as if you were there right this moment. If I regressed you and mentally and you could see it in your eye right now, was it actually a cloud or was it just a shape or what did you see?
I'm seeing a gray sky. It's dark, but you can see the gray sky. Be moon, like the moon's behind it or something. And I'm seeing, I guess, more of a circle, like a straight on circle. And in the middle of this circle is this jagged yellow line, and there's electricity coming off of it. That's what I'm remembering. That's what I'm seeing.
So was the circle a perfect circle or an imperfect circle?
It's a perfect circle in my memory.
Okay. And did you remember seeing any depth or was it flat or?
It was flat, but with that exercise I just did, I'm seeing that that it was kind of shadow boxed in front of the clouds. Like you could see that there was some depth behind it, but I'm mostly just seeing the circle.
Okay. And the lightning was actually coming off of the circle.
Coming off of whatever was stuck like in the middle of the circle, which I'm remembering or seeing as like a lightning bolt. And it's kind of like sideways, like at an angle, stuck in the center of the circle, and the electricity is coming off either side of it.
Okay, so when you say electricity is coming off either side of it, do you mean as in projecting out, straight out, or coming off in a pattern, or how is the like?
Wow, that's a really good question. It's a pattern, but it's coming off at this type of angle. I guess kind of angled like that because I'm seeing 3 or 4 on either side, kind of sparkling off of it, and sometimes it's yellow and sometimes it's blue.
So does it still in your mind look like lightning, or does it look like rays? Or when you think of it, does it still remind you of lightning, even though you might have thought at one point it was lightning? Do you still think of it as lightning as you're thinking about it right this moment?
Well, when I'm remembering the image of it, yes, it looks like lightning stuck in a circle. That little.
So it's coming off a particular point within the object, not the whole object.
Right.
Okay, so Mike, how old were you when you had your first experience of anything odd at all? How old were you?
I was about 3.5 the first time I remember.
Just like Nomar.
Yeah, and there's some indication it might have started at infancy, but I don't have a standing memory of that. But what I do remember at that 3.5 age was we were at my grandmother's house, and there was some type of family function going on because there were aunts, uncles, cousins, and all that stuff there. And I got this overwhelming urge to go outside. You know, I don't remember getting outside, but I found myself in the driveway, and my cousin, who's only a few months older than I am, was out there as well, which is odd enough because, you know, that just wouldn't have happened in a regular day situation. We wouldn't have been able to get out without anybody noticing. But there we are. We're standing there at the driveway. We don't know why we're out there. And the next thing we know, the tree line behind my grandmother's lawn starts glowing with this red light. And all you can see is like the silhouette of the trees. And eventually, this craft breaks the tree line and makes its way across the yard and parks itself towards the side of a tree at the end of my grandmother's driveway. It was, you know, what you'd call your typical saucer-shaped object, you know, kind of domed at the bottom and top. You know, my best estimate, it was probably 40 feet wide, 20 feet high. Um, had a row of lights going around the middle that were kind of like soft white lights, and it didn't look like individual bulbs. The color just kind of rolled around. So we were standing there watching that, and all of a sudden the intensity and feeling in the air kind of changed, like we're really being stared at and watched. And as this was happening, that light bar started flashing more violent or vibrantly, more faster, and it started changing to the more orange and red type hues. As this happened, almost like when you open your car door at night, some type of interior light came on inside the craft, and revealed like a row of windows right above that center bar. And in that dim light, we could see silhouette shadows of what, you know, looked humanoid, like, you know, outlines of a shoulders and a head, but we couldn't really make out any details. That lasted for a little bit. It's hard to know exactly how long. And then there's a standing blank in my memory. The next thing I remember is this object at the other end of the driveway by the road, hovering above a telephone pole. It sat there for a second and then just shot off and disappeared into space in the blink of an eye. And that was my first memory with any of this stuff.
So you had a missing. It sounds like you had some missing time. And do you have any after all the? Have you been regressed yet?
Yes,
How many times have you been regressed?
just once.
And did you pick up your missing time?
A little bit. There was still a lot of fear involved with it, so it didn't open up all the answers. It did indicate that I was taken aboard the ship, and that it probably wasn't the first time and things like that, but I didn't really recall a lot of details of the interior of the crafts or beings for the most part.
So who regressed you?
Um, a gentleman out of Dover, New Hampshire, and he probably wasn't the best guy to do it. He was more of a stop smoking, lose weight type of hypnosis guy.
Okay, so describe the craft again. I didn't get much of a good description of the craft from your encounter, what you just said. So just for a moment, in your mind's eye, go back as best you can to the event. And if you have to close your eyes, that's fine. If you can remember without doing so. So see if you can describe exactly the shape, size, color, anything about the craft. I heard something about a middle bar and windows, and that's about all I got from the description.
Yeah, so, it was this, if you took almost two rounded hubcaps and put them together, it's almost that shape, domed at the top, domed at the bottom, with a wider center, and it's fairly chromish in color. It was night out. You couldn't see, but you could see some reflection off of it, which gave the impression that it was, some type of shiny metal.
So
I
you
think
think it was like gray or silverish, or how dark was it? When you say it had a reflection, what color was it again, and how dark do you think of what color was it?
I think it was pretty chrome or silverish. My best guess, or trying
Okay,
to put it into words.
like a dull chrome. Was
Yeah,
was it shiny or was it dull?
it's hard to tell where it's night. It was the
Yeah.
reflection was dull. Whether it was or wasn't is hard to say.
Okay, and it's basically a saucer. If it landed, or how high was it in the sky?
At the closest, probably about 40 feet in the air.
Okay, and was it above you or out in front of you?
Above us and just slightly in front of us. In front of us, maybe 25 feet.
So you were seeing the bottom. You see it from underneath, not from the side.
Um, a little of both, but yeah, more underneath ish.
Okay,
But
so what did the bottom look like? Did you see any details? Was it like in shadows or
it was mostly in shadows with a slight reflection to it.
so? Did you see anything on the bottom at all? Any kind of detail?
Nothing that rings to mind. No.
So how clear is this memory? You kind of remember everything that happened. Is it is the memory of what happened very clear to you, or is it do you have a hard time remembering it? Is there any part of this that doesn't like have like it was yesterday sort of thing?
No, it's all a clear memory. It's all just part of. It's one of my growing up memories. Same as
But it's very
your
clear.
first picnic, first ball game. Yeah, it's just a
It's very
regular
clear.
memory. Yeah.
Okay, so how many encounters, if somebody asked you how many encounters you've had with aliens, near or far, other than some little dot up in the sky, I wouldn't count that. Anything close, ballpark, how many encounters would you say you've had over your life?
Uh,
10, 50, 100,000, what?
I think we put 40 in the book and we left a bunch out, so I'll say 60.
Okay. And these encounters, have some of them been a lot closer than, have you pulled up anything that's closer than some object above you in the sky?
Yeah, it's definitely some encounters directly involve contact with beings.
Okay, so how many direct close encounters with the beings have you, are you sure that you've had, that you remember consciously without being regressed? Approximately. I mean, that's not the same as, if you've had 50 or 60 encounters, some of them are going to be a lot closer than others. Some you might just see the craft come and go and you don't get any of the rest of it. You're not getting the actual beings. So how many of those 50 or 60 would you say where you actually consciously remember being close to a being? How many would those be?
Probably
Approximately.
5 or 6.
Okay. So go ahead and go through the first of the ones where I'm not so much interested in anything up in the sky or where you've been taken, but you don't know what happened on board. But anything that you can give us where you were either on board or um, where you were those 5 or 6. If you want to go over each of those, that would be good.
Yeah, but most of those aren't on boards per se. So what I have with mine is a lot of beginnings and a lot of ends. I don't really have a lot of middle pieces. But so just the
Well,
first.
anything where you could say I had a close encounter with a being. Go over that first experience that was like that, and any others that you want to add to that first experience.
Um, yeah, so I guess the first one would be um,
You
so
want to talk?
there.
Sorry, you want to talk about the that long-term visit
Yeah, that's
information?
what I was trying to figure out how to put into words because it wasn't necessarily that I saw them, but they were there type thing. Do you want to explain that for a second? Just
Sure. Mike, around, I think you're around 8, 10 years old at this point. Is that right?
yeah.
And over a 9-month period, Mike was visited almost weekly by these 4 beings. And to him, for most of these encounters, they kind of look like wispy, smoky, shadow type figures. And it was more of a perception that he had in his mind of what they were. And two of these smoky, wispy figures appeared male to him, and they were militaristic in some sense. There was another being that was a little smaller and perceived by Mike as female, and seemed like a teacher and very motherly. And then on a few occasions, there was also this other being that appeared perceived by Mike as a small child, like a boy, probably around his age. And it wasn't until his last visitation when he saw them in, I guess what he thinks is their true form. And Mike can maybe pick it up from there. But
Yeah, thanks. That was a good introduction. So yeah, I had this visit with them, but I couldn't actually see any details, but I had perceptions of their energy and personalities without seeing the details, and whether that was them trying to block something or my own mind trying to do something. I don't know. But so the last occasion that I saw them, um, I was looking down from above at the back of my house, um, and I kind of turned my head to see what was going on, and I just noticed blood against this white cloth. So I pulled my head back a little bit to see what was going on, and it was this female being carrying me, and she was wearing some type of white garment. I don't remember how we got into the house, but once we're in the house, I could actually see them. And on this occasion, there was just the two males and the female, and they looked fairly like our typical gray with the larger eyes, but they had more rounded heads, and they were more porcelainly, not completely smooth, but much smoother complex than you see it from some of these other types of gray descriptions. And they were white with, like a bluish to purple hue to them. And like Nomar kind of said, the males were always more strict, not necessarily mean, but always they were there for a purpose. Like he's got to learn his lessons type was my perception of this. And on this occasion where I could see them, they were almost more chaotic. Like normally, they always knew what the next step ahead of them was, and on this occasion, they seemed a lot more frazzled. And just I should probably mention they were probably the males, or what I perceived as males, about 5 feet tall. She was probably 4.5 ish. Um, and my it's a guess, my perception, I don't know. To me, it almost seems like there might have been another abduction type scenario that they stepped in the middle of and got involved in, maybe shouldn't have. Like they had crossed some type of boundaries, and I don't know, that was the last time I ever saw that group.
So how many different types of aliens have you? So you say you had 5 or 6 encounters with actual beings, and it almost sounds like you've had encounters with more than one type of alien. Is that correct or not true?
For the most part, all of them have mostly been with some type of I don't know if it's a subspecies or how it all works, but very that standard gray looking archetype type being. But some have been taller, some have been shorter, some have been more dark brown, where some have been more of the gray skin. So I don't know if they're all the same species or different species or how that works. 90% of my encounters have been with them, and most of my interactions have been with that type. But in the background of those, there was one that was almost mantisy looking. I don't really remember his head. I just remember his arm with almost like this. I'd call it like a chicken wing thing. It almost looked like there's an extra piece of bone between the wrist and the arm that like we don't have. And then on one occasion, there was, to me, the best way to describe it is it almost looked like the creature from the Black Lagoon, but it had more like cats-like eyes. But I mean, other than that, it's a gray type archetype, for lack of a better term.
So earlier, Nomar was saying that your encounters were with like wispy. Okay, so undefined, sort of undefined creatures. Now you've defined them quite well, but I'm curious about the how does the undefined, how does that get in? You know, when you say wispy or something less defined, more sounds like almost like see, I've had a lot of paranormal stuff happen to me. I'm a I'm not an alien expert, even though I've had encounters with a couple different types of beings. They're nothing like people tend to talk about, but I'm not an alien. I don't consider myself. I'm a contactee, but I'm definitely not an abductee. And we don't need to get into that because this isn't an interview of me. But the point I'm struggling to make here is that uh, regardless of all my alien encounters, which isn't that much at all, the paranormal stuff, I am actually an expert in the paranormal, but I'm not an expert in the sense that I'm a researcher of the paranormal and I go out doing ghost hunts and all that. I've only been on one ghost hunt in my entire life. I am an expert in the sense that I have my own paranormal encounters all my life that are like your alien encounters, but they're paranormal encounters. This is different, right? You're encountering a different set of beings. And in my case, I'm not encountering beings. It's more like, how do I put this? I have an attaching spirit that sits on my head. I have another one sits on my back, and they're not very nice beings. So anyway,
Wow.
from a personal perspective, I have that understanding as a subject matter expert of attaching spirits. So, and then my wife and I both had tons of paranormal experiences. She's had hers before I met her. I had mine before I met her. And then together we've had a bunch of them as well for 23 years. So, but those are with all wispy. It's all wispy, as in it's all undefined, and it's all beings that don't have a physicality. They're not incarnate beings. They're disincarnate beings. Okay. So when you start talking about wispy, undefined beings that you haven't locked down to a shape or a size or whatever, and you say wispy, that's what I think of as a disincarnate. And so come back and define wispy and undefined. How does that fit in your world of alien?
Um, you know, it was more, for me, it was almost like what you'd call almost like shadow people. It was almost like moving black shadows, but they had almost movement inside them. And it wasn't until, that I saw them that I could actually put that final time that I could put a definition to them. But it's almost like I could close my eyes and hear Nomar's voice and know it was Nomar. And it's sort of like that. They had the same energy and presence around them that you could tell it was the same beings, at least from my perspective. I just couldn't identify them before, and whether that was my own mind blocking or them trying to not let me see them, I don't know.
So, okay, so when you were seeing the dark, the shadow beings, okay, typically people see if you're not open psychically, if you're just a normal, average, everyday person, you're going to see spirits, disincarnate spirits. Maybe if you're lucky, out of the corner of your eye, you'll see it way over here, or somewhere. You'll just see a movement, and you can't like pin it down, and you're not actually looking at the creature. You're just getting a glimpse of them out of the corner of your eye. Is that the kind of thing you're talking about, or would they come in the room as a shadow being, and you look at the shadow and just, it's there and it's obvious and it's in front of you and it's not going anywhere? Is that, which of those is an accurate, or something else that's neither of those?
It's more the latter, but they would actually come into the room as balls of light that would come through the window. So I would see balls of light come through the window, and then those balls of light would kind of form into these shapes or beings. But it wasn't out of the corner of my eye. It was full, frontal.
Okay, so dark, all right, let's go there now. Dark beings that are not in the shape of a gray. Give me a size, a height, is there depth? Is it flat, two-dimensional, and no depth? Describe the black being in height, size, depth, anything you can describe about it at all.
Um, in height, it would be, around 5 feet for the males, and
So it's the
four little.
same height as we've been describing. It's just that you're not seeing it. It's black.
Right. I just didn't have any details with it, and it was more, it's hard to explain because I don't have anything really to compare it to. It was like a living shadow. It looked, almost like a black, well, like a shadow, but there was almost movement within the shadow.
Was there depth to the shadow, or was it flat? Was it like projected on a screen that's flat and there's no depth? It's just two-dimensional. It's got height and width, or was there depth? Was there depth, or was there no depth?
There was depth. It was almost more like if you turned a shadow into a holograph almost. I mean, it looked 3D. It looked like something was, very physical there, just had no physical attributes that you could pick up on.
So do you think they were just watching you and blocking out the details so that you couldn't define them in your mind? Do you have any idea of why they were manifesting as the shadow beings as opposed to just coming there and showing you their true self? Do you know why they did that?
I don't, and I don't know that they did it. I mean, for all I know, that could have been my own mind finding it traumatic and trying to block it out. So it could be one or the other, or a mix of both, or another
Okay, so
scenario I haven't even thought of.
I'll give you a brief encounter I had with. I was on my second close encounter occurred on a NASA base before the first space shuttle launch, and
Wow.
and I was in the station wagon, and there was a gentleman driving and a passenger seat, and then there was a young girl and a younger boy sitting to my left, and there's an even younger, like 5 or 6 year old boy in the back, right? And what I did was I got the notion I should tell these people about my first close encounter. And it takes a long time to tell that encounter because that encounter lasted like an hour or 2 or 3 hours. It was a very long encounter. So I got the notion to tell them about that encounter. So I told them. It took me like an hour to tell them, right? We're driving on base towards the actual launch site. And I tell them about this whole encounter while we're in the station wagon driving at 5:30 in the morning. And the second I finished telling the last of the story, that last word that came out of my mouth, the kid passenger sitting in the front, he laughs at me. He doesn't believe my story. So in my mind, I say, God, I wish you would show them what I saw. And within 2 to 3 seconds, craft was there on the Cape Canaveral on the base in front of us that looked exactly like the craft I was just describing to them. So I got my wish, right?
Wow.
So, but when this thing appeared, the kid who laughed at me said, "Well, maybe that's what he saw," and the father driving the car said, "Yeah, maybe that is what he saw." So they acknowledged they saw the craft to each other and to me, and then from that moment forward, it was like somebody made them forget the craft was even there. But the interesting part is, and the reason why I brought this up was that the kids to my left and behind me, it was like somebody turned their brain off. They were like sitting there staring as if no movement, no eye movement, nothing, absolutely frozen. The whole time it's there, they're like switched off. Okay. And because whatever was in that craft had some compassion to the kids and thought, well, they're not ready to see this because they're kids, right? So I'm thinking that's the reason why I brought this up, is because you just mentioned that you're seeing black, something that isn't defined, and maybe your brain turned it off, but it's possible that they were doing it to save you from the trauma as well, just like these creatures did with the kids that were in the car with me. So maybe that's why you saw black, because they were trying to keep you from freaking out or being traumatized. And I'm basically agreeing with you. So anyway.
He wants out here, don't bring him back in.
That's my wife.
Hmm.
Letting the dog out.
Okay.
He wanted in, he wanted out, and he wanted back in. So he can't decide where he wants to be. So anyway, let's see, where do we go from here? You can either describe another close encounter with a being, or Nomar can tell us another paranormal story on his side, or whatever you guys want to go with from here that you think is interesting. It doesn't matter. I'll let you guys flip a coin and decide who should go next.
Sure. Well, Mike just talked a long time, so I'll talk a little bit here. Now, Mike is obviously an experiencer, or I guess it's semantics, a contactee. And I don't necessarily consider myself that because of the level of encounters that I've had, extraterrestrially speaking. For myself, I've seen 11 UFOs in my lifetime. And while that's a lot for the average person, the reason for that is because of that first encounter that I explained earlier. And it was like 2 weeks later, after that first encounter, I also witnessed the Northern Lights. And it was the only time I've ever seen them, but I can still remember them clear as day. It was gorgeous. There were these, greenish, bluish ribbons of light. So the point of that, though, is that it taught me and really instilled in me at a really young age that weird stuff happens in the sky and I should probably look up and pay attention. So I just had this really early catalyst to look up. So I've just, to this day, I am constantly looking up. Now, when I say I've seen 11 UFOs, I do mean just that, an unidentified flying object. That acronym has become synonymous with alien or extraterrestrial. I'm just saying I've seen some stuff that I can't explain what it was. Some of them more dramatic than others. In 2007-ish, 2008, I forget now, I was living in Freeport, Maine, which is more south and actually closer to where Mike is. And I had stepped outside of the house that I was renting, and across the street was the house of my landlord. And hovering above their house was a UFO. And it was, I would say, maybe 60, 100 feet above their house. And I saw 2 red lights on the side and 1 white light in the middle. And it was kind of like in this little geometric formation, like I was seeing it head on, if you will. And it stayed there for a little bit, and I'm watching it. I pull up my phone, and 2007 phones, I had like a Nokia brick phone. And so I pulled it out to take a picture, and I just got like the squiggly red light, on a black background. So it wasn't much of anything. But I'm watching it probably for a few minutes, and then it finally moves diagonally, I don't know, maybe another 100 feet, and then stops again. And then it starts a level trajectory down, kind of like running parallel to the road that was right there. So like I fumble for my keys and I get in the car and I want to follow where this thing's going. soon as I get on the road, because I had to like back down the driveway and all this stuff, so I couldn't like keep my eye on it the whole time. So I back down the driveway. I'm on that road now, and I'm just keep looking to my right because that's where I had previously seen it, and I'm not seeing it. I'm not seeing it. So I keep driving. I'm speeding up. I get to about a mile and a half down the road, and there's this bed and breakfast there. I can never remember the name of it, but right next to it is this big open field. So I kind of whip into the bed and breakfast and get out of the car, and I'm kind of standing at the edge of that open field, and my head's on a swivel, and I'm looking for this thing, and I never saw it again. So it was ultimately really frustrating, but seeing it so close and so stationary was just really, while cool, it was really unsettling, you know. And I was much older, obviously, so it was very coherent. It was 6, 7 o'clock at night. It was definitely an unsettling but
How,
really awesome experience.
how big was it? Shape, size, date, date it
Uh,
occurred, and
don't
time.
remember the date. It's in one of my books, and the like the date and like specific time and all that stuff's in one of my books, but size of it, I really don't know. I mean, I can only estimate. It
Shape.
seems 40, 60 feet wide. The shape of it was like, here's my finger, right? And the shape of it was kind of like this ding, ding, so two diagonals and then a straight thing across. Now, I'm really only seeing that in the form of lights. So there's two lights coming down on an angle and then one in the middle. And it just kind of gave me this implied shape of something like that. Maybe like a coat hanger, if you will, without the hook top, maybe. But only seeing it at night and that there's lights, it's really just an implied shape. And
Color?
again, two red and one white in the
Well, I
middle.
mean the craft itself, not the light.
Oh, I couldn't actually see the craft itself. It was just like an implied shape. I could really only see the lights because it was a black sky with just these bright lights.
Right. So have you had an encounter with anything closer than a craft?
I've had a couple of maybe cryptid encounters, but
Cryptid as in what?
well,
It's a very vague statement.
right, and that's cool because I don't know what they are. But
Well,
I'm
what do you
actually
think they were?
I don't know.
Well,
They
give me the event or
Sure.
inter.
Well, first of all, I'd like to say that I'm a fan of the word otherworldly. I think it's a more all-encompassing word.
Sure, sure.
And Mike and I are pretty big proponents of not looking at something through certain lenses. So, an extraterrestrial lens, a paranormal lens, or like a Bigfoot or cryptid lens, if you will. We kind of like to look at everything as a whole, and that way you don't really pigeonhole yourself when you're trying to research or ask questions. So this latest sighting happened earlier this year. It was pre-COVID, which seems like 1,000 years ago now, but it was February of 2020. I was driving back to where I live, and I was probably 4 miles from where I live at the time of the sighting. And down the road, about 100 yards to the left side, this is a very rural, no streetlights, very dark road. I got my high beams on, and watching out for deer more than anything. And on the left hand side of the road, I see this 5 or 6 foot tall, like a branch like creature. It looked like it was made out of almost like the Blair Witch stick, the Blair Witch emblem, if it was sentient, if you will.
Okay.
But it
It
was
looked
really
like a walking tree.
kind of, but like a walking branches, like branches bundled together. So it had this really thin torso, and it had these real spindly arms and like these long, lanky legs. And it was pitch black in the sense of my light shined off it, and it looked like an exoskeleton, or like there was tar all over it or something. And I watched it take this exaggerated step, like over the ditch that's on that side of the road into the woods. And so again, I'm driving, I'm going about 45, 46 miles an hour, and I see it, up ahead. So there's not that's about as much detail as I have, seen it for like, 4, 5, 6 seconds. And it steps into the woods and completely, it's gone. I can't see it at that point. So I arrive at that location pretty quickly. And I stop the car. Again, it's a rural road. No one's, there's not much traffic. So I just stopped my car right there and I rolled down the window and I wanted to hear if I could still hear it walking in the woods. And I couldn't. But just a moment after rolling down my window, I was hit with like this putrid, sulfury smell. So now I have like my researcher cap on, but I'm also like amazed at the same time. And I'm like, oh, people have reported, putrid smells, with Sasquatch, with lots of different types of beings. Even these werewolves in Mexico, people have experienced a putrid smell, and that happened in April of 2020. So anyway, so that smell, I couldn't see anything. So I'm like, well, I'm going to get out of here. Plus it was freezing, but the smell was so bad. I had to put all my windows down to ride the 3 or 4 miles back to my place to try to, air out the car. And that was really everything to the encounter. So I started doing a little bit of research of the area and that road in general. I live here. It's not really something that's on my radar to like check out or whatever, but doing some research, I found that there was a UFO event that happened within like a 6-mile radius of somebody that lives on that road. And that happened in 1995. And it really wasn't more than just like a light in the sky, but kind of like that sighting I was telling you about in Freeport in 2007. It was really unsettling to that person. They just had a really ominous feeling to it. And I had a very similar ominous feeling viewing whatever this thing was. And then another thing that occurred on that same road is my father, I live like 3 miles away from my parents. And my father and mother like to take walks early in the morning. And it was 2018, I believe it was June 2018. And they were walking on that same road, much closer to their home. And at 4:30 in the morning, my dad saw this really large white entity, I suppose, no head, no legs, but he saw it glide behind this shed that was on the property of this house that they were walking by. And so he turns quick to my mother. He's like, "Did you see that?" And she was like, "No, like, what are you talking about?" And he tried to describe it to her, but all he could really describe was like this white, headless, legless being that kind of went behind this shed. And he shined his flashlight over there, but he's not going to go on people's property and stuff. But while he was shining his light, he kind of like went towards the house, and through the window of the house he said he saw like this shadowy, wispy type figure, almost like a shadow figure, like what you and Mike described, go by a window inside the house. And he's like, "Well, what the hell was that?" And he turns to my mother, "Did you see that?" And she's like, "No, I'm missing everything." And my dad is a gigantic skeptic. He completely supports everything I do, but he's a gigantic skeptic on all things, ghosts, UFOs, all that stuff. So he did say to my mother after it happened, he like, "I don't know what the hell happened, and I don't believe in ghosts, but I got to tell my son about this. This was wild." So kind of interesting that all these, these 3 things all happened like in the 6-mile radius on this road.
So, okay. So you have had encounters with creatures. They're just not what you call aliens.
Right. It was
Okay.
it was an otherworldly being of some sort, man. I mean, there was just no way it was a deer. It just didn't look like that. It was bipedal. And it
So,
looked like it was made out of sticks. Mike and I actually talked with this gentleman a couple of weeks ago, and he had heard similar descriptions of these creatures, and they have been described, or they've attributed the name the Vomit to it, which is a weird name for a being, but because it smelled so bad, that's what people attribute it to. But I guess the descriptions he's heard take place or have been encountered down in like Louisiana, something like that, right, Mike?
Oh yeah, I believe so.
Yeah. But anyways, yeah, I never heard of that kind of creature. You know what I mean? It was weird.
so the creature you saw go into the woods, have you instead of researching that area for anomalous other sightings in that immediate area, have you put in a description in Google of the creature itself to see if anybody else had seen something like it?
I have actually, and with not the best results, so I think I'm still fine-tuning it. I kind of can't get away from describing it as like branches bundled together. So I just think I need to kind of refine a little bit. Plus, like I'm a content creator without my own experiences. Like I'm constantly working on other people's experiences and try to tell their stories. So I'm kind of like in the throes of working on a few different projects right now. So it's certainly not a priority in my book right now to seek that out. On a daily basis. So it's definitely something that's written down, and like the whole encounter's written down. So it's certainly something I'm going to revisit, but once I have a little downtime.
So you have no missing time, correct?
No, absolutely not.
So, so Mike, are you going to pursue getting regressed again in the future?
It's a possibility. I really don't have much need for it myself. I have enough standing memories and stuff to know that something happened. I don't know that, being regressed again and filling in those extra details is going to give me any more of an answer. It's going to give me more, questions than anything. So I don't
So,
know that I need to. I might at some point, but it's not something I'm actively pursuing.
so the 5 or 6 encounters you've had with beings, is any of those on board the craft?
Um, no, not that I
Actually,
think of.
one of them is, but it was a memory from the regression. So I don't know if that's the best
Yeah,
way to say.
yeah. I wasn't even counting that one as
So
one.
do you discount what you recovered under your regression?
Um, I don't discount it, but I don't promote it as me and Nomar, we both kind of early on, we weren't trying to prove anything I saw. And we weren't trying to disprove anything, I saw. We were just simply laying it on the line. Like, this is this guy's story. Believe it, don't believe it. We don't really care. Just, it is what
Yeah.
it is.
Well, okay. So tell us what you recovered in your regression that was on board.
Just the real quick version was that I was taken on board, and I, at some point I remember being in some type of entryway, not quite a hallway, but um, and I could see this being walk by me, and I didn't see its head, and I didn't really like see its feet. It was kind of like waist to shoulders type thing. And this was the creature I mentioned briefly earlier that had that weird extra like piece of forearm that we wouldn't have as humans, and it was all drab and skin tone. It almost looked like wet clay. It wasn't dripping wet, but it almost had a sheen to its skin color. Um, and there wasn't a lot of interaction with it other than just seeing it. And I felt bad for it in the regression because the ergonomics of it, it looked like it was hunched, like that wouldn't be its regular position, uh, most of the time came out. And then shortly after that, I found myself laying down. I don't, remember how I got there, if I was floating, if there was a table under me or anything like that. And I could feel the presence of a lot of beings around me, but I couldn't actually see them. I don't think my mind was going to let me see them at that point. There was still a lot of fear. And what it seemed to be is, they expressed, they were, it wasn't the first time, but there was a familiarity, even though I didn't remember it before. And a lot of the commotion, and my battery is going to just die on me. So sorry, guys.
Oh.
Oh, you can still hear me because my screen shut off. All right.
Oh, I think we did lose him.
Well, that was good. It was just at the interesting point, where he was just getting interesting with the onboard stuff when he died. So he has a computer that ran out of juice. So what kind of computer does he have? Like a
I think it's a laptop, and he's not in a area where he can charge it while using it. So.
so where do you think he's? Okay, so he's in a. Is he like living in a house, or is he on the road, or
He's mostly on the road.
is he?
Yeah,
So is he like homeless?
he is. Yep.
Okay, and how does he even have money to like drive to get gas? And
He does a lot of odd jobs. Yard work, things like that. He's always doing something like that. Plus, before he well, I guess before he became homeless, he did have quite a bit of money saved up, as much as he could, anyways. And so I'm thinking there's still some reaching into that, but I don't want to speak about him on that front without full knowledge on all of it. But it is revealed in the book that he is homeless, and this whole other sub story, and it's not even a sub story, it really runs parallel with the alien stuff, is that this is a book about uh, the human, or the human element to extraterrestrial encounters, and the toll that plays on mental health. And Mike has had relationships deteriorate. Mike has questioned his own fatherhood to his kids in going through what he's been going through. He's been in a very bad place times mentally because of these encounters. And a big facet of the book is A, like normalizing the discussion around mental health, and B, that regardless of the catalyst of maybe PTSD or anxiety or depression, regardless of the catalyst, it's still something real that he's feeling. He's feeling it just like an abuse victim survivor. It's just that his catalyst, or his origin story, is extraterrestrial in nature, but he's still feeling and struggling with these emotions. And it got so bad that at one point, not that long ago, and this is all detailed in the book, that he had made a plan to kill himself. And something pretty extraordinary happened, like during the planning process, uh, again, which is detailed in the book. But the point of putting that in the book is that he's come out on the other side of that, and now lives with a more feeling of hope, as opposed to, I don't want to be here, and it's just real positive. And there's some really hard stuff to get through to get to that point, but that whole journey is really important.
so being as I'm a contactee also, I was how do I put this? His story is sort of the opposite of my story.
Okay.
He had close encounters which caused him mental illness and issues, right? Well, so
Yeah.
I was, and then he thought about committing suicide uh, in sort of in response, almost in response to having the encounters, right?
Yeah.
Well, my story is kind of just the opposite of that. The same, but in an opposite order. As in, I was considering committing suicide, and that's when they showed up.
Wow.
So I would go out every night for like a year or more. I'd say, "Hey, come down, take me away," because I didn't really want to be here. And they never did show up. Nothing ever happened. And then when I was actually thinking about committing suicide that the night of them showing up, I think honestly that that's why they showed up, was because I was ready to leave the planet. Just not in that way. I was ready to leave in another way,
Yeah.
but I was ready to leave. So they showed up because I
Wow.
was ready to leave. Okay.
That's
So
amazing.
I've never, as far as I know, I've never been abducted, but they gave me the choice to leave with them because I was ready to leave. And they showed up because I was ready to leave. So then from that encounter, I got the idea that there might be a reason to live because I had at least had a story to tell of that aliens are real, that there's something out there, that this is a real phenomenon. I had some reason to tell people something. And but the story doesn't stop there. What happened was half of my brain is going, you hallucinated that it wasn't real. The other half of my brain is going, you saw what you saw. And that conversation between the part of me who thought it was hallucination afterwards and the part that knew it was real afterwards, that conversation in my head was going on and on all day long, every single day, until my second encounter, which occurred 6 months later, almost to the day.
Wow.
And I was the one I told you about on NASA base. That I was with other people, and they saw it, this same craft, or what looked like the same craft, with me. So then, at that point, since somebody else was with me when I encountered it, I knew that it wasn't me hallucinating it. So that stopped the conversation in my head.
Wow. That must have been pretty powerful.
So I figured that they came back to keep me from like going insane because it stopped this argument in my head about it's real, it's not real, it's real, it's not real. Okay, because see, when I first encountered the craft the very first time, I'm looking up at it, and my first thought is this is an hallucination. I didn't believe what I was seeing. I just like thought I was hallucinating, and so I uh, got into my car, rolled up the window, locked it, got out, rolled up the other window, locked it, closed the window door, turned around and looked up. And I expected this thing to be gone. And I looked up, it's still there, right?
Wow.
And so it obviously wasn't hallucination, but
Right.
half of my brain wasn't convinced, even after an hour's worth of encounter.
Yeah.
Right. So anyway, that's a vague part of my story. You can listen to it on one of my podcast interviews, or not one of my podcasts, one of my interviews that I've had.
Sure.
You can listen to the most recent one. I tell the whole story in there if you want to hear it.
Definitely.
But okay, so with Mike, we're gonna have to figure out how to. Okay, so what was Mike's last stable job? What did he do where he was in a job? The last long-term job he had, what was he doing?
It was some sort of construction um, uh, in regards to like laying floor, like, ripping carpet out and then, putting a new floor down, something like that. Not 100% on who it was with or what his actual position was called, but it was some sort of labor like that.
Okay, so do you know where, if you say he's homeless, what is he in a city or is he moving from city to city? What is he doing exactly?
He's staying in that general New Hampshire, seacoast New Hampshire area. But during this spring, summer, and fall, there's a lot of camping out that he does. So he's basically like hiking and camping almost every day. But he also has a ton of friends and connections in the area. He doesn't like to put them out often, but there are always offers for him, to spend a night on a couch or something like that. And he does take advantage of that from time to time. And but yeah, that's really about as much as I know about it.
So what do you think's in his head right now as far as, okay, so how do I put this? He's gone through trauma, he's been traumatized, and he's gone through the other end of it, and he's kind of stabilized. And but it doesn't, to me, it doesn't sound like, even though he may have stabilized mentally, he hasn't got a stable job. And if he doesn't have a stable job, that means he hadn't looked for a stable job, which means he's not focused on getting stable employment, which means his head is in a different space. And I'm not trying to speak for him or anything of that
Sure.
nature. I just am trying to understand how where his head's at now that he's made it.
I mean, not that I can speak for him either. I guess the only thing I could say about that is something that he told me, and I think he might have even said it publicly. I'm not 100% sure, but the thing about Mike is that he cares about himself last. So once COVID hit, first of all, he does have like goals and plans and things that he's putting into place slowly but surely to kind of get him out of where he is, financially right now. But once COVID hit and there was this loss of being able to meet with the other experiencers that he feels are more important than himself, that really kind of threw him for a loop. And it was all about kind of scrambling to make sure he could support those people as much as possible during this time. So there's just been a ton of work on his end on trying to make that happen in different ways. Now, since things are a bit more relaxed, they are able to meet like once a month out in an open park area, I believe, in New Hampshire. But the crux of all that is his headspace is I'm last, everyone else is first type of thing. And that's just kind of where he's at right now. And it's the kind of dude he is,
So being a selfless person is great if you have lots of means.
Yeah,
Do that. If you don't, then
it's a tough life, and
well, what I would say to him if he were listening now, and he can listen to this later, is he needs to, if he wants to help other people as much as you and I know he does, he has to get himself in a position of stability first as a first step in helping those other people. Because if you can't help yourself, you really can't help anybody else because you're not working from a point of stability. And
sure.
I'm not saying you should turn back to I'm first or I'm more important. I'm just saying that helping others involves, it's like, how do I put this? You're in a plane, the plane has crashed. You want everybody to get out of the plane to survive. The first step is not to save the other people. The first step is to put on your mask so you can breathe. Otherwise, as the smoke fills inside the crashed
Sure.
plane, you're gonna die, and everybody's gonna die because you can't breathe oxygen because you have to put on a mask.
And
Save everybody.
that's a very rational thought and obviously, accurate, but, we're human beings. We're all flawed. I am severely flawed. And it's Mike would rather just rip himself out of the seat, get as many people help as he can, and then again, worry about himself. And it's not this crazy heroic, selflessness. It's like his instinct. And I actually do think you can help people and not be stable yourself. I myself suffer from anxiety and depression, and I have, my own mental health issues that I contend with daily.
We
And
all do.
and some days are worse than others, and some days are great. But I try to help people as much as possible, and also to my detriment, so I don't think it's uncanny or unthinkable that he has put himself in a position to help as many people as he could before himself. Now, that doesn't mean I don't want him to help himself, because I really do, and it's at his own pace. And because of the amount of time I've spent with him talking about really raw subjects, I trust him. You know what I mean? His brain in his life has gone through a whole lot that I can never understand, and I did my best to put it into words. But this is a truly unique individual with some sort of power or something that I just don't understand. He's
Okay, so
you know
here's my suggestion. Okay, so I've had 60 jobs, over 60 jobs as myself over the years. When I used to do 1 day jobs, 5 day, 2 day, 5 day jobs, And then I was doing 1 month, 2 months, 3 month jobs. And then I started doing 6 month jobs and a year-long jobs. And my last job was 3 years long. It was the longest IT job I've had in my life. So I finally found some stability, and that ended like 2 or 3 weeks ago. So I'm on the bench. I'm still being paid because I'm a consultant. I didn't normally. The contract ends, so it's my job, and I don't know how much longer I'm going to be on the bench before they let me go. So I'm looking, very actively looking.
Sure.
So in any case, the fact that I've spent so much of my life unemployed, I've basically lived half my life unemployed. Okay, so I'm 59, so that's like 30 years. Well, no, subtract 18. Okay, so I'm living off my parents for 18 years, right? Or less than 18 years. 18 from 59, that's 20 from 60 is 40, 41 years. So then you split that. I've had 20 years of employment and close to 20 years of unemployment, which is like, how do you live for 20 years being unemployed?
Right.
And I've done it. And and I'm not scraping bottom. I'm certainly not set for life by any stretch. But having said all that, I sort of almost like feel like an expert in finding work. So what I would suggest is he wants to meet with these people at a particular location, out in the woods or in a park or whatever. Okay, so that's a particular spot. You have an area code. So what you do is you spend a certain amount of your day, and it doesn't have to be a lot of your day, 2 or 3 hours, whatever amount of time that he feels like investing. Doesn't matter how much or how little, but you go to Indeed, you know Indeed, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so you go to Indeed, you put in the zip code where he wants to be, which is the park where they all meet, right? And then just say within 5 miles, 10 miles, 25 miles, whatever he thinks he can drive from his truck, from where he is going to establish his house to which, or, let's say his employment, it's going to be near his house. His house is going to be near his employment, right? So he wants his employment to be near that spot, right? Because he wants to be able to go to that spot whenever he needs to, right?
Sure.
Okay. So then he puts in anything that is even closely relevant to what he does in from that area, from that zip code, within X number of miles that he thinks he's capable of driving back and forth to that spot. So he can always be there every time he wants to meet with those people. And he needs to like keep tweaking the description of the job until it is something that is a stable employment. Now, the pandemic has killed a lot of employment. But one thing I noticed during the pandemic, I would go down to where I live is not far from the Chattahoochee River, and I would walk from my apartments. I would go out of my apartment, go down to the street, the highway, walk across the highway, take a left, and go down to the light, take a right, and then from there, that street, I would walk all the way to the river, and I would, check out the river and then come back, right? And there was like, I've been doing this for like 3 years. And this last year, during the pandemic, they had a whole bunch of guys out there doing road construction work. So that's the thing about, we think about all the, all of the, all the people that have lost their jobs because of the pandemic. Well, there's a certain segment of the population that is totally ignoring the pandemic. And that doesn't, I'm not talking about the people who are working from home. I'm talking about people who are actually going to work and just risking it. And that includes the construction workers. Now, there's a certain level of construction workers. I would pass them every time I would go down to the river. They're putting a pipeline on this street, or they finished it, but there's still a segment of it next to my apartment complex going from there north. I don't know how far. It's just sitting out there waiting to be put in the ground. But during that whole year, they had guys that were flaggers. Flagger, you just hold up a flag. A dummy monkey could do that. They're not getting paid a lot of money, but I'm sure anybody who's hooked up with that temporary agency that was supplying them flaggers would have anybody that would to take that position, right? So what I'm saying is, in the construction world, you can find work even during the pandemic, because the construction world is not stopping because of the pandemic. They're going,
Right.
they're continuing to work,
Yeah.
and a lot of people don't know that, but that's been my experience to know that. So you might want to tell him that he could use Indeed, put in the zip code where he wants to be, and then keep tweaking the title of the job until it becomes something that seems to fit for his talent. And I'm sure he can find something in that area code that is for unskilled laborers, that is within driving distance of that place where they like to meet, so that he can have steady income. And then at that point, at some point doing that, he should be able to afford another house, and not necessarily by himself, because at the same time he's going to look for, let's say the people he meets with, any of those people, if he is bonded with any of them, they're like friends to him. So I'm sure that he wouldn't mind living with one or more of them.
Sure.
They could band together. It's next time another thing he could do is, next time they meet up, say, are any of you guys struggling? If they say yes, that's a good thing for him, because he could say, well, okay, so you're struggling for money, right? Great. What if you and I, who else is struggling here? Anybody else? If they get 3 or 4 of them together, and they all have a tiny amount of savings or a tiny amount of income, they could get together and get like a 1-bedroom apartment. And 6 people living in a 1-bedroom is a hell of a lot better than one person living on the street.
Mm.
So he should be able to hook up with the people that he likes to help, and
Sure.
help them even more by them splitting bills. And do you need a roommate, or do you have enough? Oh no, I don't have enough income. Well, if I could pay half your rent with or a third, if there's like 3 of them there, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
He should ask them about helping them even more by trying to split bills with
Yeah.
him.
Wow.
That way he's not on the street.
Yeah, no, that's really good advice. I'll pass it on. That's valuable. So thank you.
I'm gonna let you go because I know that you're tired of hearing me lecture. And unless you have some other paranormal or event that you'd like to mention that you've had in your life that you just want to throw in here, that you can think of it, it's up to you. If you've got something you want to just put out there that's you haven't mentioned, you can do that, or we can end it either way.
Yeah, no, I think that's all I got right now. But really appreciate you letting us come on and tell a little bit of Mike's story and let us promote the book a little bit. Really appreciate it.
Well,